Welcome to day 4 of Designing a Tabletop RPG with your host, Adam Bell, among other things, a tabletop game designer. Today I am standing at my computer and I am going to try to just write some stuff down about what we've got so far. I've just installed the free trial of Scrivener because I've heard it's good. I used to use OneNote, but Microsoft just makes it hard to use OneNote. I don't know why. There's like 4 versions of it. It's hard to install. Can't deal with it. So let's see if maybe this is more my speed. I'll probably be switching back and forth between my screen and me, but I have it set up right now so that my screen has me on it. So let's just fucking dive in. Yesterday we started diving into the basic dice mechanics of this game. So characters have... I already hate it. Characters have stats. Characters have perils. Characters have skills. And then something else related to the sentiments. Characters have stats which track what the character... Well, I shouldn't talk like this. Track what the character's good at. Perils track what gets in the way of the character's actions. Specialized tracking of what they're good at. Alright, so to roll dice, you roll the dice when something's unclear. You don't want to, I want to make sure to not be encouraging everybody to roll for everything because that gets annoying, but so not when something is unclear, when the GM and player disagree about what happens. That's too confrontational. When the where's the real version? Oh, final PDFs. Yeah, that's right. We bookmarked the PDF. Shoutouts to Dan Phipps for bookmarking the PDF of Subway Runners and talking about it in the Brain Trust Science Fair video. Action roll usage. When to call for an action roll. I've already thought about this, so let's... When to call for an action roll from No Stone Unturned. The action roll mechanic is in place to determine the results when an action taken by the player character has an uncertain outcome. When a player character tries to do something in one of the below categories or another situation where the outcome being unclear is interesting, the action roll will determine who gets to add details to the scene. So performing an action which somebody doesn't normally do, doing something dangerous, looking for an item or some knowledge that might be difficult to locate. But again, specifically when not to call for one, don't call for one for every little thing that the characters try to do. If the stakes are low or the character is known to be good at the action, let them succeed. Don't call for one every time the characters try to get information. Only use it when the investigation may have consequences. So you roll the dice when like taking action that has the potential for interesting complications. I mean, once we get further into this, that can be further defined. But, I mean, people have played role-playing games, and everybody has a different... Every table has a different... Like, some people aren't going to be rolling for fuck all. Some people are going to roll all the time. That's fine. So, the steps are going to be... I like writing out steps. If you've ever read one of my games, you know that there's always a list of steps for how to do something because, frankly, I find that easier to reference because, I mean, you can just go here to the action roll reference and like, boom. Once you read this book, you don't need to read it again. You just look at the reference. And while it looks like a lot, anyway, continuing on. First, as always, the player states the desired outcome. Simultaneously, player chooses stat, and GM chooses peril. So The player is choosing the thing that they're using to actually execute. And then the GM is choosing a peril. The peril is the thing that's most getting in the way of the action. Are you trying to lie somebody, but you're a softie, so your heart is getting in the way? That kind of shit. After both sides have chosen the peril and the stat, then I want some way for like that work to be checked. So if the player chooses a stat that like definitely isn't it, then I'd like for them to be able to be called out for that shit. As I said yesterday, gamers exist, unfortunately. The gamers are here. So I'd like some way for the system to be able to handle that kind of shit. So what could that be? I mean, there is the option of just taking position and effect, but I feel like the perils kind of are doing a little bit of that work. So I don't know that position effect have a place here. I mean, it could just be take position and then the effect is peril, but I don't think that's good either because they kind of are one and the same. So what can you do? I don't know. Let's talk about skills. Skills are going to be specialized things the character is good at. I think each skill is going to correspond to a die size, and skills kind of are going to be providing an advantage. I like rolling dice, right? So let's look at it this way. I've got a handful of dice, and I want to roll them. By default, what am I doing? I'm rolling 2 dice. Let's say I've got D8 body. This is a body check. And I've got D6 peril body. It's also body. It's body versus body here. Or I don't know how the stats, the character sheet works yet. But let's talk about rolling dice. In this situation, the stat that I'm using is a D8. And the peril that I'm up against is a D6. By default, I'm going to just roll these 2. But let's say I have a skill. It's not a great skill. And because it's not a great skill, it's a D4 skill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll these out and then see what happens. Right? Okay, so my peril is a 4, my stat is a 6, and my skill, if I could find it, is a 3. So the skill is maybe not super helpful here because it's a D4 skill, and we'll have something for leveling those up in some way. In this situation, right now, my stat is higher than my peril. So I, in a traditional gaming parlance, I succeed this roll. What that's going to mean in this game, since we're based on No Stone Unturned, which means we're based on the indie hack, is that I, the player, am going to get to add some amount of details because I've won. It's a difference of 2, so the winning side, me, I get to add 1 hard detail. A hard detail is just anything that you would have to write down that changes the scene in some way. So I don't know what I was trying to do here, but whatever it is, I, as the player, now have 1 thing that I can very much change about this scene to accomplish my goal. So if I'm in a fight, the classic RPG scenario, 1 hard detail here could be putting a hard detail on my opponent and saying that they are incapacitated. Boom, I did it. So that's cool. Let's say instead, real quick, so we're on the same page, that all 3 are a D6. We're gonna say the green one is my stat, the white one is my peril, and the purple one is my skill. So I said green one stat, white one peril, purple one skill. So by default here, I had failed this in traditional parlance. So by default, the GM would be adding details. Not much. Just a hard detail, and then something would go well. So this is kind of a mixed success type deal. But shuffling on over, my skill in this situation rolled higher. So in fact, my skill has taken me away. So the skills in this game are going to act as a sort of advantage. But with different die sizes. So like obviously when all 3 are the same, skills are really good. But in that situation earlier, when my skill was much worse than my stat, it's not as good. So I think that's where we're going to go with that, and then we'll see what's going on. Now that I've fleshed out the skills, I'm looking back to the negotiation thing. And what this might be, and what I'm thinking of is instead of a position or effect type deal, like in Blades, not to keep going back to Blades, but it's a good game design. I'm thinking there is going to be the ability for the GM to add dice in to represent a certain difficulty. And I think that might be good. So maybe not necessarily a negotiation type thing, but GM adds dice. So the GM is going to add dice for hazards and difficulty. So I think this is going to be, okay, you're trying to use your mind to climb this, but I'm going to go ahead and say that makes it D4 harder. And you're trying to get in a sword fight with a master swordsman. And so that is an extra D8 against you. So even though maybe your peril in that case is only your D4 mind, because while you're completely outmatched, you're cool as a cucumber usually under situations. So your mind's not getting in the way. But at the same time, this guy's gonna fuck you up. So you roll those just like I specified before, and then this time, the highest between your peril and whatever difficulty hazard dice the GM added is going to be what you're up against. So as this goes on, and maybe as your campaign goes on and you get more and more used to the rules and get more and more powers and get more and more embroiled in something, you're rolling a fuck ton of dice. And yeah, I think that has potential for like a long-term thing. And then also there's a lot of mechanics there that open up some space for just different shit that you can do with player powers and monster design and stuff like that. What?
How did you say monster?
I think that's good for that. I think we've got a basic dice mechanic for this game now, which is great. I'm pretty happy with that. There might be one or two more things that slide in because Sentiments from No Stone Unturned is a cool mechanic that allows you to basically risk things that you care about in order to do a better job on the die roll. So something like that may make its way in, but that's not for right now. Okay, so last thing I want to think about right now, and maybe this gets cut because I don't get anywhere, is what the fuck are the stats and the perils? Like what? Because body mind, if this is the core of the game, I don't think just keeping it as broad as body, mind, and heart will do. So what can we do that's different than that? So let's think for a second about the classic shit. Is this what we want? Probably not. So do we want to go somewhere specific, like the way heart is? Where, the skills that you can have are compel, delve, discern, endure, evade, hunt, kill, mend, sneak. Let's go over here and look at Blades in the Dark. Classic. We always got to look at that. Hunt, study, survey, tinker, finesse, prowl, skirmish, wreck, attune, command, consort, sway. That's a big pile. They're broken up into 3 things. I think something along these lines is a good idea. Something that are like the stats. We can replace the word stats eventually with something like actions. So there's obviously a lot of Forged in the Dark shit, even if this is going to be far away from that game. That it definitely influences my design. And actions, I think, is another thing that I could probably take. Let's see. If this is the way to go, then what are the perils? Because this doesn't, if we're switching stats for actions, I don't think perils make sense to be the same thing. If the thing is that I'm hunting, and then the GM's like, well, your prowl is getting in the way. That kind of makes sense. No, that doesn't.
What?
I'm trying to, if the stats are Blades in the Dark style, like action attributes, but instead of dots, they're all mapped to different die sizes. What are the perils? After some light conversation with my partner, who was so kind as to pause their video game for a second to bounce some ideas back and forth, I have landed on the stats are going to be actions. So the stats are going to be, let's just keep it simple, stats are verbs. They're all in the character sheet and assigned to die sizes. So then the perils, on the other hand, are going to be nouns. So these are going to be things. Also, these are also going to be assigned to die sizes. The stats are going to be what you do. But the perils are what part of you gets in the way. So these are like explicitly negative. It's explicitly negative sounding shit for like fear, weakness, apathy. It's like the stuff that you're fighting against to do stuff. So every day when you get out of bed, you're fighting against that apathy to just say, fuck it, I'm just going to lie here. And ideally you roll higher than your apathy die. But, if you're a really apathetic character, then perhaps that's a D8 and it's rough. So right now this is going to be a set list that's universal across all characters, but perhaps that gets expanded to something else. Yeah, it's going to take some thinking to figure out exactly what the lists are. Probably, I'm guessing like 8 things. So let's go over our dice roll. Again, it's going to be a similar thing, but with the same thing in mind. We will say, currently, let's pretend that we're going to use the Blades in the Dark actions. I'm going to say I have this green D6 is my prowl. This purple D6 is, let's say, a stealth skill that I have. And then this D8, unfortunately, is the clumsy peril presented by the GM. And then this D4 will be representing like the guards that are on duty, that are paying attention and looking out for weird prowlers. I'm going to roll those dice. My prowl turned out to be a 5. My stealth was a 2, so my score is 5. The clumsiness, my peril, was a 2, and then the guards were a 4. So the negative side, the GM score, is a 4. So we've got 5 versus 4. I am up by 1, which we all know means I get to add 1 hard detail and then 1 negative hard detail of my. So yeah, that's that die roll. I came up by 1, which is cool. So I'm going to sneak successfully. However, of course, there's going to be a negative thing that happens too, which is no good. You hate to see it. I think it works. I mean, I think that is a good. Honestly, I like that dice system a lot, and I'm excited to play it at some point because I think it has a good degree of like agency and a good degree of, well, because I just think it has a lot of different moving parts that aren't all that complicated, but open up a wide like space to design playbooks in, to design just a bunch of stuff that interact with these mechanics, and to add more to the character sheet. Maybe we'll see. But there are enough things happening here that it will be fun to play around in. And yeah, well, let's see how it goes. I've been going on for longer than normal today, so I'm going to call it quits here. I think we definitely made some headway on this core loop of the game, this core dice mechanic, always very important. So I'm going to call it quits here. Thanks for tuning in to day 4 or whatever the hell this is. Have a good day. Yeah. I hope you thought the fucking dice mechanic was cool, because I did. Oh, what's this?